This story is called Randall's Complex. January 16th. It being the 16th of the month, Randall Orr left his data entry job at Fleischman Associates, bought a bouquet of mums from Allen Flowers, and went to Valleyview Cemetery to visit his mother. Rebecca Orr had passed away on May 16, 1992. At the time of his mother's death, Randall was still living with her. The pair had been attached at the hip since the severing of the umbilicus, and his lack of a career or a long-term relationship proved it. The adult world was too much for him, so when he kneeled over on that cool spring day from sudden cardiac arrest, he had no one and nothing to turn to. The 16th was his day with Mom. He couldn't go with her to the flea market or Phil's steakhouse like he used to, but he could drop by with some of her favorite flowers and have a heart-to-heart. There was just one problem. Valleyview Cemetery, Mrs. Orr's eternal resting place, scared the living daylights out of him. She was buried under an oak tree in a far corner of the cemetery, just a stone's throw from the back fence. During the winter month, by the time Randall got out of work, bought her flowers, and made his way across town, the sun was already setting, and that patch of dirt that contained his dear mother was always partially shrouded in darkness. He always made sure to leave her grave before the entire place fell into shadow. That would have sent him over the edge. No matter how terrified he was, however, he couldn't miss his monthly visit. It was 4:30 when he walked up to her grave and placed the bouquet of flowers delicately against her headstone. "Hi, Mom," he said as he knelt down in front of her grave. "It's me again." He stopped and stared at the grave as if waiting to hear her raspy voice talk back. "I sure miss you," he said. He paused and tried to think of something interesting to say, but it had been a pretty slow month. As usual, he informed her of all the near-death and potentially cataclysmic things that had occurred to him over the past 30 days. There was the car that took the same 4 turns behind him on his way home from work the previous week. He had avoided that madman by pulling into a driveway, turning off his lights, and waiting 10 minutes. Then there was the cheese. He bought a block of Crowley sharp cheddar cheese from Ackle Markets and had eaten a few pieces before noticing it was moldy. To avoid potential poisoning, he underwent an intense herbal cleanse. He guzzled vinegar for 3 days. This went on for a half an hour, sharing of the full, dull details of his paranoid existence to the indifferent corpse below. He looked at his watch. 4:52. He'd gone a little longer than usual and a shuddering gloom crept over the cemetery. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I've got to go. It's getting on, and you know how I feel about being out this late. I love you, and I'll see you next month." He hurried out of the cemetery as the sun hit the edge of the horizon, its golden rays replaced by the unmerciful blackness of night. February 16th. Randall pushed the pedal to the floor of his 88 Buick LeSabre and slammed his fist on the steering wheel. Come on, he said as he waited for the light to change at an intersection. The flowers from Ellen's lay on the passenger seat, thrown there haphazardly as he had rushed into the car. His last meeting at work had run extra long and he hadn't been able to leave the office until 4:30. He had to stand in line at Allen's while a customer reamed the owner out for not delivering flowers to his wife on Valentine's Day. He nearly had a panic attack in witnessing the altercation. When he walked in, the guy was leaning over the counter, his hands pressed hard into the wood, like he was about to jump the florist. Randall rehearsed all of the probable outcomes of the confrontation. The owner's not going to give him what he wants, and he's going to get mad and they're going to yell at each other back and forth until the guy pulls out a gun and shoots the owner, and since I'm a witness, he'll probably shoot me too. Or maybe he'll see me looking at him funny and kick my ass, slam my head into the cooler, and drop a vase on me. I don't know who this guy is. He could be a mob boss or a drug dealer for all I know. Oh my God. Luckily for Randall, he left the scene unscathed. The owner gave the customer a refund and he left smiling. But it could have gone badly, thought Randall. You have to be prepared for every contingency. He parked in front of the cemetery and hurried to the gate. He had never entered this late before. It was too dark. Every ounce of his being told him he should turn around, that only doom and terror awaited him if he went in. But the calmer side that he popped 100 milligrams of Zoloft a day to maintain made him move onward. "I'll make it really quick," he told himself as he neared his mother's little corner of the cemetery. "Just a hi, how are you, I gotta go sort of thing. That'll be good enough for this month. Mom will have to understand." He approached her grave and set the flowers down. He had never seen her headstone look so dreary, so gray. A small sliver of light cut across the family name, ORR, in big blocky letters. All he could hear was his own breath and the brisk wind blowing through the trees. "Hi, Mom," he said, more nervous than usual. "I'm sorry I'm so late." He explained his workplace predicament and the incident at the flower shop to his mother, all the while watching the sky darken. He didn't think it was possible for light to recede so quickly. He looked at his watch. It was 4:52. He knew the cemetery hours like the back of his hand. The caretaker closed the front gate at 5 p.m. sharp in winter. "Mom, I gotta go," he said, the words slipping out through stuttered breaths. "I'll see you next month, okay? Bye." He ran up and over a hill teeming with mausoleums. His mother's grave was located 10 or so yards from the back fence, and he had underestimated how hard it would be to navigate back to the front gate in the dark. His feet pounded on the gravel path, scattering little pebbles, sending a loud through the cemetery. Sweat dripped down his face and stung as it hit the February breeze. He looked down at his watch. It was 4:55. He still had time. But when he turned the corner onto the main path out of the cemetery, his heart sank. The large iron gate was closed, its 8-foot post towering over him. A heavy-duty steel lock hung from the bars. "No, no, no, no! This can't be! It's not 5 yet!" He looked at his watch again. It still said 4:55, but the second hand wasn't moving. He wasn't sure when the watch had frozen, but it was certainly well past 5 p.m. The moon was high in the sky, casting a bright white light on his worried face. He tugged at the lock, hoping it was old and worn and would break off, but it was solid. It would take a good set of wire cutters to break that sucker off. He thought about climbing up and over the fence, but the entire cemetery was surrounded by spear-like iron posts, the kind you would see around a castle in some schlocky horror flick. Terrible thoughts started to flood his brain, as if the levee holding back all of his worries had suddenly exploded. He was used to seeing the absolute worst in any situation, but this was a new dimension of terror. That's when he saw it. At first he thought it a shadow, maybe a car passing by down the street, throwing the light off. But there were no cars around, not a single one had passed by in the last 10 minutes. Besides, shadows don't move like that. Randall couldn't pinpoint what he was looking at. There was no analog, nothing then in nature to compare it to. It resembled a human being, only superficially. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and something akin to a head. Its skin was black and oily, and as the thing moved, its outer layer slid around like some kind of sludge, making a sickening squeezing noise with each step forward. And despite its loose, dripping appearance, it was moving fast in Randall's direction. He juked between trees and mausoleums, running as fast as he could from the creature. Sitting in an office chair for 8 hours a day had sapped most of his fitness over the years, but the sight of the creature's gelatinous bog-like body added a much-needed spring to his step. He turned around and saw it slide over a tombstone. What looked like its torso plopped down on the frozen dirt and sprung back up, as if the laws of physics had ceased to exist. Randall knew he couldn't keep this game up all night. The gates were locked, and eventually this thing would gain on him. He thought of its slimy, tar-like flesh enveloping his body, sucking up his bones and organs like a hoover from hell. He was yards from his mother's grave when he got an idea. Her tombstone was several feet away from a mausoleum, which itself was just yards from the cemetery fence. If he could hop from her tombstone onto the mausoleum, he could leap over the fence and out of this nightmare. The creature was just yards behind, its incomprehensible form sloshing toward him. He readied himself with a leap, throwing his elbows out to his side and ducking. As the creature's extremities reached out toward him, its shapeless hands mere inches from his body. He leapt on top of his mother's tombstone as the creature's black fingers came down, barely missing him. The gap between the tombstone and mausoleum was longer than he estimated. He used his momentum to fling himself onto the stone roof. He looked at the cemetery fence. It was a relatively long jump. He steadied himself to get a running start. Just then, the creature's slimy hand grabbed his ankle and started to pull. He kicked at it and broke free, but the creature's rubbery appendage extended and reached toward him again. Randall looked back and saw its face, a horrific assemblage of teeth, bone, and boils. It leered at him with unfathomable glee, as if it had been waiting for him in the cemetery since the dawn of time. Giving it all his sad and worn-out body could, Randall rushed from the mausoleum and leapt into the night sky. Chief Burnett stepped out of his squad car with his morning coffee and walked over to the cemetery fence where the coroner and several of his officers were already gathered. Forrester, the newest guy in the force, turned away and puked. "Christ, Forrester," said Burnett, "you nearly spewed on my new shoes." When Burnett saw the body impaled on the fence, he too nearly emptied his stomach. Randall Orr was hanging there like some half-assed scarecrow, slumped over, a sharp, blood-soaked spike sticking out from his chest. He had a deranged look on his face which had grown white from the loss of blood in the February freeze. "Goddamn junkies," said Burnett to the coroner, who was getting ready for Forrester and the other unlucky rookies to lift Randall's body off the post and onto a stretcher. "This guy must have been on PCP. Who the fuck would try jumping that?"